Okay, this Phil Kaveny production arises out of a necessity, and it's a result of me taking a contemporary art history course. And of course I assumed I knew everything about contemporary art history, even though I've never taken an art history course in my life. And I got myself in a little academic trouble about a couple quizzes. Now, some of my work, of course, is brilliant, and everybody knows that. But when you have a list of names and you have to identify them, well, I'm not so good at that. But my professor, whose name I won't mention because I haven't cleared it, has agreed to at least look at something for extra credit and to make up for the rather abysmal quiz performance. And out of the necessity of that dialectic, a whole sort of a refocusing of my lifetime creative project is starting to roll. And this is the first aspect of it, because it's not like I didn't learn anything in the course. And what I've learned is that since 1970, art does not simply take place in a museum or an art gallery, and it's not necessarily simply what old men call art, old white men who have their ideas and exclude everybody else from the aesthetic process. So with that in mind, I want to talk about, well, yeah, I guess I'm going to talk about my play at a certain point in my life, because I was young once, and I'm Vietnam era, that's what I would call it, and I was a Vietnam protester, and I was a pallbearer at my best friend's military funeral, and I said some things that people still remember, but that's another story. And then along with that, I fell in love to have my still beating heart ripped out. And it was a bad time for American history. And I remember standing across from some of my friends in National Guard uniform, and their bayonets were fixed, and they were waiting for orders. And of course, I had my arm around the waist of Janelle Quinnell, and she gave them the bird. And I said, maybe we better not do that. But what then happened was something hit in my mind, because my first iteration at University of Wisconsin-Madison, I had a whole philosophical inclination. And I realized that I had this rage inside of me, and I wanted to give voice to it. And I wanted to do it some way, and I didn't know how exactly to do that. And I went to the engineering campus, and the engineering library had just opened up, and they did an exhibit on artificial limbs. Now remember, this is at the end of our Vietnam involvement, and that meant there was really a market for that kind of product. And I thought, well, what if I wrote a play, and I wrote it about the, well, your generation probably hasn't even heard of the Sterling Hall bombing. It's a very terrifying thing that happened in UW-Madison, where 3 American-born protesters blew up a 10-story building on campus. Most of it was evacuated, and it was intended to destroy property rather than kill people. And I thought, if I could take all of those feelings that I've got about that and put them in an art form, then I'd really have something. And I could write a play about that. And I thought, well, if I did that, then I would have a protagonist who was the ultimate survivor. Massively self-interested, caring about nothing but himself. And I said it in World War I Germany. And my guy was a munitions inspector. And he avoided the German draft because he shot off his little toe and got gangrene and lost his leg up to his knee. And all he was to do was to survive, because that's all I wanted to do. And I was bitter, and I was angry, and I couldn't get a job, and I was asked to leave graduate school because I wrote the F word on all my finals. And out of all that, I started to write a play. The play is called The Munitions Factory. And my philosophical impulse was to say that the impulse which would blow up the factory was the same impulse that built it. You can't kill for peace. It's a contradiction in terms. It never works. And then I started talking to people about it. And I really couldn't write because I'm dyslexic almost to the point of functional illiteracy. I mean, if you try to read my handwriting, it looks like a map. And I remember telling the disdainful graduate student who I've been with for the last 45 years that I had written this play. But when I showed it to it, you couldn't read it. I still have the original text, and it really does look like a map. So of course I had to get people to type it. And generation after generation, that play is kept alive. It's for sale on Amazon now. And I realized that if I consider that as performance art and my promotion of it as integral to it, then I can look at it a different way. And my friend Gary Moore, who is upstairs now working on water damage from a snow dam on our roof, suggested from his profoundly and inspiring Christian position that I put the glory to God on it. I thought, well, if I try as hard as I can and I fail in this effort, I got God to blame for it. It's not my fault. I did everything I could. And that got me thinking about my own theology. And there's been a lot of spirituality which has been appropriated by people who are sanctimonious, Philistine-like, holier than thou, who only want you to make you feel, they can only feel good if you're feeling bad. Well, that's not what religion is supposed to do, at least in my mind. And I put it this way to my wife, who calls her, I forget, she's a Taoist something or other. And she probably would like a little better explanation than that. But if one says, if you got two football teams and both teams pray to win, one's got to lose. Well, what about the loser then? Are you saying somebody won a game because the Packers beat the Vikings? God likes the Packers better? Well, not necessarily, but you could say, well, God, and we've gendered God male, sadly, because through most of history it's been gendered the other way. But anyway, maybe the goddess likes a good game. Maybe the idea is not winning or losing, but to play the most out of a game, good game. And actually, Philip Pullman in the Golden Compass series, which contests a lot of C.S. Lewis's philosophy, ends up with immortality as being something where you turn your life into a good story and you pass it on to somebody else. So this is probably my first performance, as far in the first step that my professor is going to get. She won't be able to see the whole project, but I took a fundraising course last semester, and I have a lot of quite powerful skill sets and the support of some people who have compared me to really great playwrights that nobody reads anymore. So maybe they could read me and then say, well, yeah, he writes like Kaveny rather than the other way. So this is like, I don't know, like, I guess it's like laying the keel on a ship or something. And this is the first step in the production. So this is a plea for support. And this sort of validates the other 51 videos that I was going to do, which at one point I sort of thought we had done enough videos. But just the experience of working with the team is an end in itself. So I guess this is kind of a plea for your support, and I am a good fundraiser. Thank you.